During the early days of the 16-bit Genesis, Sega was looking for game software to make the platform stand out. No matter how good some of the games in Japan were, North America was a different region with different needs. Initially, Sega was a big believer in the sports genre and put a lot of effort into getting popular Western games up and running, like Joe Montana Football. It was around this time that they started to put together publishing deals with US and European developers to augment its Japanese-based lineup. After Joe Montana Football, they picked up the 688 Attack sub-license and had Microprose ported over to the Genesis. They would work with Novo Trade for California games. A new internal studio called Sega Technical Institute created Dick Tracy. Infogrames did Fantasia. Technopop was behind Spider-Man vs. the Kingpin. And in October of 1991, Sega released ToeJam Earl, developed by Johnson Vorsanger Productions. Sega was looking for unique games, and this one was certainly that. In this episode, we will be taking a look at the game that GamePro magazine said had cool graphics, incredible originality in gameplay, super fresh tunes, and lots of chuckles. This, my friends, is ToeJam Earl. The story is about a couple of very weird-looking alien rappers who have crashed into planet Earth and lost their ship. You must make your way across 25 randomly generated stages to collect the 10 pieces of your ship. There's also an option to choose 25 fixed world stages that do not change. Stages are represented as islands that are stacked on top of one another. To make it to the next stage, you need to find the elevator to move up. The islands have edges that can be fallen off of, so it is possible to have to retrace your steps should that happen. Don't be afraid of those edges, however, because you can find hidden paths that are crucial in your journey. As you are looking around, you will come across a few things of interest. One are the presents that contain various items. You can hold up to 16 presents in your inventory, but you won't know what's in them until they're opened. Once you open them, you will always know what they are as they become labeled in the inventory. Unfortunately, not all presents are a good surprise. While you can get some useful items like high-top speed shoes, Icarus wings so you can fly, tomatoes that you can use as a weapon, and food to replenish your life, there are also crappy items that can actually hurt you. If you happen to use a rain cloud, it zaps you, causing damage. A school book will put you to sleep. The randomizer will reset all your presents. And the total bummer will just straight up kill you. On that note, it's also important to know that not all food is good for you. If it looks suspect, leave it behind because it will cause damage to you. By far, one of the most useful items to get is the Unfall, which is an item that returns you to the higher stage should you have fallen off. There is also a currency system in place where you can use bucks to buy goods and services. Bucks can be in presents or just lying on the ground. They can be used with certain Earthlings for life, identifying presents, and at mailboxes to order more presents. Another thing you will run across in your journey are the previously mentioned Earthlings. Most of these people are enemies and are out to cause you frustration. They can damage your health, cause you to lose control, and even toss you off the level itself. These enemies can be women pushing shopping carts, insane dentist, nerd hordes, and the terrifying ice cream truck man. You do have a sneak button that can be helpful with a few of these enemies. If you can catch them while they're still asleep, you can tiptoe right by them without waking them up. A few of the Earthlings are actually helpful. There's an old guy in a carrot suit that will identify your presents for a few bucks and take away the guesswork. There's also a wizard that you can pay to heal your life bar. There's a number of different Earthlings beyond that, and you'll figure out pretty quickly which ones are helpful and which ones are not. Again, your sneak is very useful, especially with Santa Claus, but I'll leave that one for you to discover. Earthlings aren't the only danger you'll face. There are sharks in the water, tornadoes in the desert, swarms of bees, hamsters rolling around in exercise balls, and chickens with freaking tomato guns. ToeJam Earl also features 2-player split-screen co-op. In this mode of the game, you and a friend can explore together and search each stage twice as fast. As you cover ground, you'll uncover a map that can help you navigate the stages better. Here you can see where you have already been and where you need to go. If you find a telephone, pick it up because it will reveal part of the map that's still hidden. Once you find a piece of your ship, a cinematic will tell you what piece you found. Likewise, a stage with a ship part on it will alert you when you get off the elevator. The current stage you are on is located in the middle of the information bar at the bottom of the screen. Finally, you will notice next to your life bar at the bottom, you will see a ranking. You begin as a lowly wiener, weak and flaccid. As you explore and use your items, you will move up in rank, which gives you a longer life bar so you can take more damage, and every third rank will give you an extra life. ToeJam Earl is a fairly average looking Genesis game. While there is a fair bit of variety in its items and enemies, the stages themselves vary little from one another. This one came on an 8 megabit cartridge, so it was certainly a decent sized ROM, but it appears the majority of that went into everything but the game world. This is likely because of the option of having each stage randomly generated. The different islands have very little unique features. There are roads that allow you to walk faster, sand that will slow you down, and water that must be slowly navigated through. Typically in a game, you would get something like an ice level, a jungle stage, and maybe something inside a volcano. ToeJam Earl keeps all this simple as can be, so I can't honestly say anything here is impressive visually. Even the animation is rather framey and simple, often little more than a few ticks for each action. On the plus side, the split-screen game is smooth and never slows down. When two players come in close contact, it switches back to just one screen and then splits again as you separate. This is likely another reason why ToeJam Earl keeps things simple visually. Split-screen games always needed to lessen the detail during this time to ease up the strain on the hardware and keep things running smoothly. All in all, it's not ugly, but it's also nowhere near one of the better looking games for the Genesis. Because ToeJam Earl was a Western-made release in 1991, it was one of the few games that used the Sega Music Development System, one of the first sound drivers commissioned by Sega of America. And for what it's worth, the music and sound effects here aren't bad. It has some nice instrument effects that add a bit of funk to the otherwise simple presentation. I also thought the voice samples were fairly impressive. None of it is going to give Streets of Rage anything to worry about, but it fits the game well and doesn't detract from the overall experience. Here are two tracks to give you an example. On the surface and in the very first minutes that you play the game, ToeJam Earl isn't very interesting. Your character is slow, there's a lot of empty space to cover, and it's real easy to get killed until you know what you're doing. The combat also feels clumsy. For instance, aiming and hitting enemies with your tomatoes can be really frustrating. It's often labeled a roguelike, but that comparison is loose at best. It's much more a straight-up adventure game that just happens to have a couple of roguelike traits. It's one of those games that you have to go into looking for its depth, and then learning to take advantage of it. It is here where this game starts to shine. How you go about the stages, learning where and when to sneak around, using the right item at the best time, and taking advantage of helpful humans transforms this into a much more interesting experience. For instance, simply opening presents can be a real gamble. In the early game, find an open area where you have a few presents in your inventory. With no enemies around, you should be able to deal with anything unexpected. Deeper into the action, you can save your bucks and use the carrot guide to help you identify presents. Saving items that let you get around faster is a great way to deal with those powerful enemies. There are many strategies to learn to make this game so much more enjoyable. But I cannot stress this enough. The multiplayer in ToeJam Earl is transformative. It takes a good game and elevates it to something unforgettable, if not something truly epic. Working together, sharing life, covering ground faster, it's all insanely fun. Because of its split screen, you can both go and do whatever you want. Another area this game succeeds in is charm. ToeJam and Earl are undoubtedly two incredibly stupid characters, but they have that lighthearted 90s appeal that's really hard to deny. I tell you these things because I hated this game at its release. No kidding, I'd even go so far as to say I was openly hostile to it, calling it one of the worst games on the Genesis. It wasn't until I played it with someone, took the time to formulate strategies with the items, and really got into what made the game so fun that I realized my error. Of course, your mileage will vary no matter what. This game is for folks who love multiplayer or those that really enjoy exploration and strategic elements. If you are an action game person, everything here is likely to turn you off. While there is some light combat, nothing here is ever at the level of a platformer, a run and gun, or a beat 'em up. I would imagine the simple visuals are a turnoff to some as well. There were a lot of bad games published by Sega of America. I do not count this one among those. This is a well-made multiplayer adventure that has a load of replayability for the right people. Sure, the graphics won't blow you away, and it can be a little slow at times, but there is much more here to like than to hate on. Many of the magazines of the time felt a similar way. It was well received by dozens of publications both here in North America and in Europe. It's actually difficult to find a bad review of it. It sold well for Sega, and that led to a shooting game on the Miniature Light Gun peripheral and a sequel called ToeJam and Earl in Panic on Funkatron. The latter changed up everything and turned into a side-scrolling game where you had to capture Earthlings and send them back home. Sadly, when the third ToeJam and Earl showed up for the Xbox under the title Mission to Earth, it sold terribly, causing the developer ToeJam and Earl Productions to call it quits. In 2019, the series showed back up thanks to one of the creators of the original, who crowdfunded the game ToeJam and Earl Back in the Groove. This one was a return to form and very similar to the first game. It was widely hailed as a fantastic follow-up. I don't think it's wrong to say that the original game is most certainly a Genesis classic. It's not something that will appeal to everyone, but for those that it did, it's right up there with some of the console's best software. I'm Sega Lord X. Thank you guys for watching, and I will catch you next time.